Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Ambrose Blowfield here from the Sales Mastery Company, and we're here to deliver some value to you in understanding the psychology and the values and the culture of the all-conquering or semi-all-conquering All Blacks rugby team from here in New Zealand. It is World Cup year, and therefore this is a very useful topic for us to get back to the basics and start to see about what it takes to produce an amazing outcome as a sports team. Hopefully, if you interacted with us already, you will have this downloadable workbook. Please take notes in that workbook. If you're a business owner, if you're a strategist, if you are simply the senior salesperson in the sales team and you need to step up and take the lead, I want to help you and your team succeed just like the All Blacks succeed. Now, as many people have pointed out to me in the last few years, given that my utter devotion to this incredible team, they did not win the last World Cup and they have not won all of the World Cups, which is absolutely correct. But as I'll explain in a moment, there are reasons behind the All Blacks' success, and there's no reason why you can't implement those reasons and cultures and values into your sales team. You don't need to become the All Blacks, you just need to be the best possible team you can possibly be for your section and for your market. Now, if you've got the workbook already, then obviously you'll have seen the second page, which is a welcome for myself and a brief insight into who we are. If you haven't, then as always, please send an email to admin@salesmasterycompany.com and request the Sell Like the All Blacks Part 1 workbook, and we'll get you a copy. So today is for us to start thinking about the long term, not the last World Cup, not the World Cups before that, but literally start to look at this sports team, or put it simply, this team, think sales team, this team, despite coming from the country that typically has the fourth or fifth numbers of people who are registered as rugby players, population-wise, that's the supply of good labor. Likewise, normally the fourth or fifth richest rugby union on the planet, again, over a century. So again, once we start talking about for a high-performing team for over a century, I was lucky early in my career to join Procter & Gamble. They've been going about 175 years, and they've been a very dominant player globally, as well as most countries that they operate in, as a winning team for 175 years. And for most of that time period, there's core values for that. Even though I left them over 20 years ago, I still recall the 7 core values on which they recruited, on which they promoted, on which they discussed and made decisions and communicated. The All Blacks are no different. Once you're saying it's for a century, there must be reasons beyond they're just lucky, they're just bigger, they're just fitter, they're just richer, because none of those things are fundamentally true. So I want to talk about the fundamental principle in particular today, to talk about culture and values. The brief background, as you probably read on the screen or read in the workbook itself, their win ratio is typically they win almost 8 games for every 10 games they play. And of the 2 games they don't win out of every 10 they play, they normally draw 1 and lose 1. So again, they typically win about 8 out of 10 games, lose 1 out of 10 games, and draw 1 out of 10 games over a century. In the professional era, that's increased to 8.5 games out of 10 they win. So in terms of, if you're a betting person, I'm not, but if you were, you'd look at it thinking the chances are they're going to win this game. Now, the last couple of years have been particularly tough on them, but when you start to assess them for over a century, you start to go, actually, they're not half bad. Other comments, they have won the previous 2 World Cups despite losing the 2019 semi-final to England, which was then won as a tournament by the amazing South African team that went there. But the whole point I want to understand is they were in a very, very bad state exactly 20 years ago. And the turnaround started when they started to peel back the layers and they started to understand the behaviors around nutrition, around mindset, around recovery, around respect, around behaviors, around language, around humans. They started to realize way back in 2003 and in the periods and the aftermath of what was a disastrous World Cup, losing, albeit in the semi-final to Australia by an amazing Eddie Jones coached Australian Wallabies team. They started to peel it back and go, it's not just we didn't execute on the day. There's a lot more that needs to be fixed. Now, very shortly, I'll be running a masterclass free of charge in June to talk about how to fix an unprofitable sales team. Do look out for that both live or in a recorded form if we let you have access to that later on. Sometimes our team make it accessible for a period of time, for example. But the point I want to stress here is when you're trying to fix an unprofitable sales team, or in their case, an unsuccessful sports team, It's often behaviors and words and language and culture. In the case of a sales team, there's normally 4 sales areas you need to fix your sales team. And culture underpins that, just like accountability underpins back, which is normally why I say, how good is the manager at holding a sales team accountable? If the answer is not that good, that's a fundamental issue, because that compounds the problems across the organization. So what I want to do now is talk about some of the core values within the All Blacks, and hopefully pique your interest to think, you know what, I'd like to apply that. I want to discuss that with our sales team. I would think if we did that one, that's going to really help us. Number 1, always put the team first. That is not a common trait to have in a sports team where we're used to expecting stars. It's also not a common trait to have in a sales team where we might have a few lone wolves who aren't necessarily team players. One of the juggles for any business owner or sales manager is the difference between motivating the individual and motivating the team, creating individual success and creating team success. So that's a worthwhile conversation about where should the balance be in your organization. You may not have to be quite as extreme as the All Blacks, where they see rugby like netball as very much a team sport. But in sales, you go think about the fact that we are only as good as a team. So that's something I'd like you to debate. Number 2, no one's bigger than the team. That's a very important thing. So Alex Ferguson allegedly sacked his amazing captain back in the 90s when he actually went through the process of speaking out against the team. So there he was doing a particularly good job, an expensive player in the team, and he criticized his own players publicly. So Alex Ferguson brought him in, and he said, listen, mate, you just can't do that. You can't badmouth about your team to everybody out there. You've got to be, telling them off in private, but essentially thanking them publicly. And this is Roy Keane, the Republic of Ireland captain at the same time. I think he was 4.2 million when Manchester United bought him from Nottingham Forest. Incredible enforcer in midfield. Did it once, told him off, said, don't do it again. Did it the second time, sacked him. And when I say sacked him, sold him. And the whole point I want to comment around from that is saying you're not bigger than the team. Now, I'm not saying you need to become a leader like Alex Ferguson, but there's a lot of legacy to think about, given that he was successful for over 20 years. So for me, when I want you to learn from leaders and teams and cultures, learn from the long-term successors. I mean, some people say, well, I should be learning from things like the Chicago Bulls because they did a couple of rounds of three-peats, but it's a very short, dominant period. Yes, it's a competitive sport, but so is rugby and so is sales. So think about that. Think long-term, please. Number 3, sweep the sheds. I love this one. Allegedly, after the 2015 World Cup, when the All Blacks, as is shown on the image of the workbook right now, had gone back-to-back in winning 2 World Cups in a row, allegedly, at the end of the day, went back, had some beers inside the changing rooms at Twickenham. They apparently, a couple of the senior players, not junior players, not the bosses, not the physios, not the support people, but 2 of the senior players grabbed a few brooms and swept up the mess into a big pile in the middle. And that's things like toe tape, and obviously it's mud off the bottom of people's boats, no doubt for your beer bottles and a few, beer cans and probably some bottle opening and some, lollies or sweets or sandwich wrappers or whatever else they deserved at the end. The whole point is you're not more important than the cleaner. So how humble is every member of your sales team, even the superstar members of the team? If they lack humility, they wouldn't get into the All Blacks. They certainly wouldn't stay in the All Blacks. They might not deserve to be part of your team long term. We only exist with humility. Number 4, be honest. One of the things that the All Blacks instigated 20 years ago was an honesty session the Monday after a Saturday or Sunday game, where no matter who you are, no matter what your role is and your seniority, you have to receive feedback very directly and openly and give feedback very directly and openly, where people can talk about what went well in the game and what went badly in the game. And I don't often see this in sales teams. We're often scared to do this because we think I might upset them, that will demoralize them. But the way they do it is with very, very strict rules. They have total honesty sessions for an hour or 2. You say your mind, speak your mind, and you're done. So you never go back and revisit it. There's actions to be taken from it, but you can't then come back to them 3 weeks later and say, hey, remember when you didn't do that? Remember when you did do that? You don't get to do that. So total honesty in a short period, everybody learns the lesson, takes it on the chin, and then works towards the game the following weekend or the weekend after. Number 5, recruit on values. I'm just currently coaching a team in Argentina in the sales area. And when I mentioned this to them, they said, well, that's something we've never done before. How do we do that? Well, at the very base level for a business owner or sales manager is to say to people, when you're not at work, How do you spend your time? That's a good insight into somebody's values. Or what did you like most about the culture of that organization? Or what sort of environment do you best suit to be worked in? And how do you want to be managed? And all of these types of questions is starting to understand what drives this person beyond simple sales success. So recruiting on values was something that Procter & Gamble did. I think they're the best organization in the world from my experience of them, of how hard they try to recruit people based on values. There was a 30-page application form that they only allowed you to complete if you've already got a degree or you're about to graduate with a degree. So instantly they'd filtered people out for people who naturally wanted to learn things. And then instantly at the 5% of the population that could join them, 30-page application form, that's a high benchmark. 30 pages, that takes some time to get right. But the last 2 pages were asking you questions to write out in paragraphs when you've exhibited behaviors aligned to the core values. From memory, the 3 that they picked out that stick in my mind, one was problem solving as an ability they want, and certainly a value that they want people to have because they want them to always be solving problems. So they've got us to write examples that they then explored at interview level, 2 rounds of 2 hours of interviews, and that's before the final assessment for 3 days. They asked us about teamwork because they wanted people who are going to fit within the team. And they asked us about leadership because they want to develop leaders for the future because they operate on a culture of meritocracy, meaning if they recruit people in their early 20s to join their sales team, those people have to become sales managers or sales leaders long term. So if they don't come in with any form of leadership skills or experience, the chances are they won't want to go up, which means they're going to stagnate, which means the meritocracy culture breaks down. So again, that was picked up in the recruitment first round of filling in the forms, then of course further embellished and developed on for interview number 1, then 2 different managers for 2 hours for interview number 2, and then 3 days of sales training where again they were testing us on different aspects around it. If you recruit on values and you sack people and make them redundant if they're not aligned to the values, the chances are you'll strengthen your culture, and that's something the All Blacks have been prepared to do countless times before. And then finally, the mixed match, as I said before. If someone does not behave according to the core values of your organization, they're like a cancer that will spread through the organization and fundamentally kill the culture. If someone is not aligned to the values of you, they will leave of their own accord, or you'll have to push them unless you're prepared to sacrifice the organization's culture and values for one person. And once you sacrifice that, where's your integrity and what is this culture? You'll lose your best workers, not necessarily your misbehaving worker. So please keep that in mind. At the bottom of the page, it also talks about the fact that they want to leave the jersey in the best place. That's something most salespeople don't necessarily want to do, where if I leave in 5 years or 10 years, I want this place to be better off. Not all of the salespeople in the world are driven in that way, but if you hire people based on teamwork and self-sacrifice, the chances are there'll be more believing around that. Again, the All Blacks think more around the legacy. So the reason why partly they're successful for 100 years is they're thinking 100 years from now, how will they be remembered, and is the place in a better place? So it's really important to keep on that. The final comment I want to make there is a great saying from the All Blacks, which is that better people make better All Blacks. And I think it's really important to remember that your duty of care as a sales leader, as a sales manager, as a business owner is actually to develop the people in your team, not just while they're operating for you in the team, but as humans. Help them grow financially, help them grow spiritually, or help them grow emotionally, help them develop as parents, help them become leaders in their own right with charities and community access all across the world of what they do. Help them grow. Now, the reality is you might train and develop your team and they leave and they'll hopefully go and blossom and do good things elsewhere. Hopefully they won't go to your direct competitor. But it's better you do that than you don't train them and they stay, and you don't work on developing them and they stay, because they're just occupying a seat and they'll stagnate on their performance to you long term. So as I said before, as a business and as a team, you've got to get clear on your core values. We have other articles and other resources on our website sharing aspects around that. You've got to build the right team, starting by recruiting people based on values. You've got to push people out the door who do not align to core values, or they'll affect those around you. You've got to follow the right processes and the right terminology when you're having honesty sessions. It's got to be the right process. Otherwise, it really can also undermine the core values. If you want to hear more about what we do, then on the back page of your workbook, you're welcome to connect with us with a free sales strategy session. simply book in for a strategy call. It's Zoom, it's free of charge. We'll give you free advice. We simply ask that the business owner or sales manager can attend. You can use this as a sounding board for anything. If it go on to help you with our sales academy or other things we do, great. And if not, we put some more prosperity into the world, particularly in tough economic times, then let us help you do that. So once again, I've been Ambrose Blowfield. We're the Sales Mastery Company, and be sure to take action from today. Take care and have a great weekend.